I'd like to share with you a few sentences from a letter that the Frierdiker Rebbe, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, wrote, which offer tremendous insight into life, in particular when dealing with challenges and even overwhelming challenges in life, as we, the entire Am Yisrael, Jewish people, are going through right now. And he shares, Milvad asher b'mei chaye ha'adam, yesh tkufos kvuos. During life, we have fixed, established periods in one's life. Zimei hayaldus, nairus, bachrus. We have our childhoods, as we're becoming more youthful, as we are a teenager, a young adult. Omlivad masiv kishrei neisav. And aside for the natural capabilities and talents gifted to a person, whether they're regilim or beinanim, whether they're average, or whether a person's gifted with extraordinary gifts and talents. V'chein tivoi, likewise in regards to one's nature. Baishin v'atziv, if he's a shy a person who's more melancholy, or a person who's upbeat and a very happy person. Milvad kol zois, aside for all of this, hahashkacha elyena, the watchful eye of Hashem, mizamenes tekufos miyuchades, prepares unique moments in our life, asher lepamim mishanim teva ha'adam, which at times can change the very nature of a person, and open up this person's abilities and talents to place him on in an elevated place, a uniquely elevated place. Hatkufa yes chazaka b'pulasa al nafshay v'hispatchos kishayneisav hi hatkufa ha'ashira. So he says that these moments that Hashem chooses by His divine providence to open up a person's abilities is the rich. This is how he describes it. Hatkufa ha'ashira, the rich period, bi'inuyim v'yisurim, when we suffer and are pained, bad avodas tamula, on behalf of an effort which we put. A work that we put great effort into, bishkido b'meretz, diligently and with conviction, bishvil deim and adeyas, for a particular perspective that we're advancing. Ubefrad mishen misabik im reitvav ba'ad kiyum v'chizuk dasei. In particular, when one is battling against an enemy on behalf of his religious beliefs. Tkufa zu, this period in one's life, im heyoisa sevucha bi'inoi haguf, although it is consumed with affliction of the body, v'yisuri hanefesh, and affliction of the soul, ashira hi b'reisham chazak, it is rich with a very powerful impression that it leaves on the person. V'heim yemei ha'or b'chayi ha'adam, and these are the illuminating days in the life of a person. So the Frierdiker Rebbe tells us that when a person goes through a very overwhelming challenge that actually creates suffering both physically and emotionally and spiritually, that a person will see that when they look back at those days, that these days actually opened up within that person an awareness of oneself that otherwise the person would not become aware of, and actually can to be to such an extent that the person's personality, their nature, actually changes from such an experience. This is what we would call a godly perspective. We would hesitate, I hesitate to share such a perspective sometimes. Surely this should never be shared with someone who is in the middle of a crisis. However, for anyone who's not in crisis, and I hope that everyone who's listening to this isn't, then we develop our perspective in knowing that the reason why we have overwhelming moments in our lives, which can seem to be crushing in that moment, is because Hashem, through His Hashkacha Elyena, is actually offering us a unique opportunity in this moment. And this would be, if we can maintain this perspective, even in a crisis, and if we don't maintain this perspective in crisis, when we are outside of the crisis, to look back at it and realize that the reason why Hashem put us into this moment was to offer us something. It wasn't to oppress us and to make our lives difficult. And when we reflect on what's going on in Eretz Yisrael now, we have to look at what is going on from this perspective, because this is the true perspective. This is the perspective looking through the lens of Hashem. And this was expressed in this week's Parsha by the famous, well-known question, the obvious question, where Hashem instructs Avram Avinu to leave his home, his birthplace, his family. And the Torah says, Lech Lecha, Hashem says to Avram, Lech Lecha me'artzecha, u'me'moladetecha, me'beis avicha, el aretz asher areka. And the obvious question is, why is Hashem telling Avram, Lech Lecha? Hashem should simply say, Lech me'artzecha, leave your land, me'moladetecha, your birthplace, me'beis avicha, in the home of your father. But why does Hashem throw in this unusual word, Lech Lecha, which has multiple meanings? And what's very fascinating is that we find that while this is the first test of Avram, of the 10 tests that were given to Avram, according to at least many opinions, the final test of Avram was the Akedah. And we find that Hashem uses the exact same expression by the Akedah. Kachnos binchas yechidcha asher ahavta, take your son, your only son, who you love, es Yitzchak, v'lech lecha el eretz hamiriah, and go for yourself or to yourself to Har HaMoriah. Again, Hashem could have simply said, Lech el Eretz HaMoriah, go to Eretz HaMoriah. That would be the proper grammar. But Hashem says, Lech Lecha. There's an emphasis here. And fascinatingly, the Medrash Tanchuma tells us that HaNisayin HaRishain, the first Nisayin, Kinisayin Achrein, is like the last Nisayin. Both Nisyanis, Hashem guides Avram in how to deal with this Nisayin. And the guidance, as our Rabbeim teach us, is that in order for a person to be able to get through a Nisayin, a test, which we know that the word Nisayin comes from the same word as Nes, as we say in davening, V'sa Nes, to raise a banner, the kabetz, that it means to raise a banner, that Hashem raises someone up through a Nisayin, because the word Nisayin, which means test, also means to be something which flies high. For someone to be operating on a much higher level, one has to be able to get through the Nisayin. That's the whole purpose of Hashem giving us a Nisayin. And how does a person get through this Nisayin? The Lech Lecha. For a person to be able to realize that there's something deeper that lies within me. And this Nisayin is helping me become aware of that and get in touch with that and live out of that, out of this deeper place, this deeper part of me. And what is this deeper part? This deeper part is, as we know, that a neshama is made up of multiple levels. There is the aspect of midas, of emotions that a person has as their as part of their neshama. There's an elevator, the higher part of the neshama, which you know is the Chabad, is the intellectual aspects of the neshama. But there are even deeper levels of the neshama than this, and the deeper levels of the neshama are the neshama itself, living out of emunah and bitachon, which is deeper than an intellectual engagement with something. It's an engagement from a deep inner knowing, because I have a nefesh elokis, because I have a divine soul which is one with Hashem. Therefore, it recognizes and it knows what is divine, what is aligned with Hashem, what isn't. And even though I may not be able to prove that or articulate that, this knowing that my neshama has is far deeper than anything that can be articulated and limited to words and expression. And when a person can live out of this deep level of conviction, which is not a conviction because it's an idea that I understand. It's not a conviction because it's an idea that I can prove. It's a conviction because there's just a deep, inherent, visceral knowing that lives within me. When I can get in touch with that, then a Jew becomes the very powerful being that Hashem has designed us to be, which is an unstoppable being. Because any type of rationale or argument is irrelevant to the very deep knowing, which is far deeper than any intellectual conversation. And so Hashem tells Avram by the first test, you want to get through this first test, Lech Lecha. You should know that this is for you. It's for you, and is for you in a way that Lecha, when you go into you, that is how you're going to find the perseverance and the strength to be able to get through this test. And Hashem says the same thing by the final test, which was an overwhelming test, which contradicted logic. As Hashem told him that through Ki Yitzchak Yikar Lecha Zara, that the destiny of the Jewish people is through Yitzchak. And here Hashem is telling him to sacrifice Yitzchak. But Avram understood that he has to go deeper than any calculations, to the deep knowing that he has to live in alignment with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and when he does so, that is where he discovers the deepest presence of himself and the deepest presence of Hashem. So this actually encapsulated Avram's life. And Avram was actually the beginning of the mission of the Jewish people, which continues on until today and will continue. And so this illuminates and enlightens us in understanding how we approach the overwhelming challenges that sometimes Hashem puts before us, understanding that it's not there to crush us. It's not there because Hashem is trying to make our lives difficult. On the contrary, Hashem is giving us an opportunity to discover a very deep part of ourselves. Very often we ask ourselves, why me? Why me? Why is this happening to me? Let it happen to someone else. Or why do I have to deal with the Am Hashem? Why are you giving me obstacles? Why are you making my life difficult? And the answer to both of those questions is the same. Why me? Because Hashem has chosen me to be a person who will have the fortitude to go deeper into myself and discover the power that I have within myself. The reason why Hashem is putting these obstacles before me is not because Hashem doesn't love me. It's not because Hashem is trying to make my life difficult. It's because Hashem is hoping that I'm going to go deeper within myself and discover the full extent of who Hashem made me to be, so that I can bring to the world everything Hashem is expecting of every single Yid, of every single Jew, because of the infinite presence of Hashem that lives within every single one of us. And there's only one way to discover this, and that is Lech, Lecha. To realize, number one, that Hashem is doing it for me, Lecha for you, and Lecha to you. That Hashem is saying, go into yourself. And in 1976, there's a very well documented, and you can find the video online to watch, a very fascinating meeting that occurred between the Nechei Tzahal, a group of injured soldiers from the IDF, who came to Canada, to Toronto, for the Paralympic Games. And before they went back to Eretz Yisrael, they got onto two buses, buses that were able to accommodate handicapped individuals, to bring them to Brooklyn to have a special meeting with the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And when the Rebbe spoke to them, the Rebbe shared a very powerful message that was very moving for these Nechei Tzahal, as they are referred to. And he told them that he takes objection with the term Nechei Tzahal, which means injured soldiers. And the reason why he explained is because if a person went on a mission which was not something that was a mistake and they should not have done, but on the contrary, it was something that they were fulfilling their duty as members of an army. And not only were they fulfilling their duties, but they were actually fulfilling a divine duty, because they were protecting Am Yisrael, Hashem's chosen people. And by way of that effort, they were damaged. Something happened to them and they lost a limb, God forbid, or they lost the capability of a limb operating properly. Many of them were lost an arm or a leg or legs, or lost vision in one or both of their eyes, or lost hearing. When such a thing happens to a person, because they are doing what they are meant to do, and this is actually the divine desire that Hashem wanted from them, that means that Hashem is not weakening them. It's not possible that Hashem is weakening them. But on the contrary, Hashem is revealing to them that they have an inner power which is even greater than can be expressed by those things which they're lacking now. So they will discover within themselves a strength and a power which is much greater than what they knew they had until now. So he suggests, the Rebbe said to them, I suggest that we should change the terminology from Nechei Tzahal to Mitsuyanim, to Mitsuyanei Tzahal, to the extraordinary, the excellent of the IDF. Because in fact, these are people who have a much more elevated capabilities now than the average person has. And all of this is an expression of this idea from this week's Parsha of Lech Lecha. And Hashem should actually give every single one of us the strength and the fortitude, the emotional and spiritual strength and fortitude, to be able to look at the times we're living in now and ask ourselves, what is it, as I'm experiencing these overwhelming experiences that we as the Jewish people are experiencing, what is it that Hashem is expecting of me to discover within myself? How can I step up and be a bolder Jew? And how can I support my fellow Jewish people and standing up and taking the positions that we need to take, whether they are political positions, which for us is not politics, is simply to protect every single Jew anywhere in the world where a Jew may find themselves. How can I support Am Yisrael, and how can I support myself, thereby supporting Am Yisrael by becoming a much bolder Jew? And by every single one of us doing that individually, the Jewish people become a stronger people, to the point that we reach the strength that Hashem is waiting for. And may Hashem bring us finally to the height of Am Yisrael, in fact, shining and being the moral example to the entire world with the coming of Mashiach.